we have stewarded hundreds of millions of dollars of the precious dollars that you all work so hard to give and to raise to Israelis affected by October 7th and the resulting wars that have since proliferated. The programs that our communities invested these dollars in had to be nimble, innovative, effective to meet needs of volatile, ever-changing situations. This session is going to delve into a few examples of those programs that are just really creative and exciting ways that we are responding to some really tough situations. And I'll give you a little bit of a behind-the-scenes view as to how the kosher sausage gets made. And with that, it's going to be my pleasure to kind of hand the floor over to a fellow Texan, Renee Wizig-Barrios, who leads the Houston Federation. And I will say all communities have done a really great job responding to this crisis, and I think Houston probably stands among them for really, really engaging their community. And so an extra round of applause for Renee and the work of Houston.
Thank you, Bobby, for that introduction, as well as for the dedication that you and all of the other members of the Emergency Response Committee bring to our collective work. Good morning, everyone. As Bobby said, I'm Renee Wizig-Barrios, and I'm the proud CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Houston. Part of the difficulty that Bobby spoke about is looking at how we can respond to a crisis of such unprecedented scale in Israel. It is definitely different than other crises before. And so while we knew the immediate lifeline services and emergency response, what to do in terms of these unique needs, we needed innovative responses. And so that's what we're going to do today, is talk to some of our really impressive change makers from Israel who are focusing on response in three fields: mental health and trauma relief, agricultural recovery, and employment and routine rebuilding. But before we engage in this conversation with our change makers, I first want to introduce Rena Goldberg. Rena is a vice president for Israel and Overseas and deputy director of JFNA's Israel office. She has been spearheading the professional side of this collective response. I'm not sure how much she has slept in the last 402 days. I have been so awed by the incredible dedication of Rena and Becky, who is with us, and the entire Israel team. I hope you will join me in giving her an extremely warm welcome. Rena?
Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Bobby. Good to be here with all of you. So on the one hand, it was a simple goal: match dollars that were raised to needs on the ground. Find out who's helping, support those needs. And indeed, in the beginning, it was straightforward. We went to our trusted partners, the Jewish Agency for Israel and JDC, and others we turn to when there's an emergency in Israel, the Israel Trauma Coalition, the Israel Association of Community Centers, and we asked them what they were seeing in the field through their professionals, and we began to direct funds. Tragically, we also knew other key areas that needed our support: medical care for those that were physically injured, and to prepare for possible escalations and pastoral care. I want to pause and mention a uniquely Jewish aspect of Federation's emergency response, which we has started at the beginning and extended through, but I think was especially potent in those first couple of months, which is spiritual support. When we think of the American Red Cross or other aid organizations and the basic needs that they provide, what was I think so beautiful and so Jewish about our response was that we paused to reflect on the Jewish needs that were happening. Whether it was rabbinical figures to console and support evacuated communities, grieving families, or for the rental of Shiva tents. In Israel, there's a structure, there's a system set up that if you sadly are sitting Shiva for a week commemorating your loved one, there's a tent, you rent it, the city provides it. There were so many Shivas that needed to be observed in those first weeks that they ran out of tents. New ones had to be provided and bought. And federations helped, provided that, so that families didn't need to worry about that. And a month later, when kibbutzim, who were not all together, needed to come together for shloshim, Federation paid for transportation so that communities could come together to remember and observe. We often don't talk about that, but I wanted to just pause and mention it because I just think it's so special about what we all do. The sheer quantity, the sheer number of people who we lost, their grieving families, completely overwhelmed the system. And when NGOs stepped in to fill those gaps, federations provided funds to hold families during this time. As our work progressed, our knowledge of key players was only strengthened. It often became clearer who was best positioned to meet the ongoing needs. And sometimes the picture took more time to come into focus and is still coming into focus when taking into account the scale of the need, the potential for the role of the government, how other funders were focusing their efforts, and more. Some needs are highly localized, the community center in a specific city, while others are regional and still more that require a national solution. Some organizations have been meeting needs, who have been meeting needs were in the field for a long time, while others emerged to meet both new needs and the volume that was being responded to. The emergency response then was in a sense diversified, with large organizations with multiple programs and smaller ones with a singular niche or focus. And of course, as you're about to hear from our speakers, the nonprofit sector needed new solutions given the scope and the scale. Our speakers today began to develop their novel approaches in the earliest days of the crisis, but it took time for them to develop, for the field and the system to be ready, for the systems to be set up. And even now, the programs continue to evolve and are adapted to best meet needs as the initiative has targeted. As you'll hear, the need to meet people where they are, to adapt to the reality on the ground, has been critical to the initial success of these programs and will ensure their long-term legacy and long-term federation impact. Federations can surely be proud of our role in supporting this innovation, as I know that I am. Thank you.
Rena, thank you so much for setting the stage. Is the mic on? Can people hear? Okay, great. Sorry, I just always want to check that first. We have been really proud in Houston to partner with JF&A and to support all three of the organizations, as has our entire system. So I want to introduce these three amazing change makers. Danielle Abraham, who you heard this morning, is the director of Regrow. Regrow is focused on securing the future of farming communities devastated by October 7th attacks through innovative agricultural interventions. Adib Letner, who is the head of JDC's workforce development programs. JDC's flagship emergency employment program is called Getting Israelis Affected by the War Back to Work and combines trauma counseling with employment guidance. And Dr. Gilad Bodenheimer, head of mental health services at Israel's Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Mental Health in the Community Initiative is providing accessible mental health treatment in the community while preventing stigma and fear of barriers to those that are seeking treatment. Let's start with you, Danielle. Regrow prides itself on putting the farmer in the center. Can you introduce us to one of the farmers who was impacted by October 7th?
Yes, of course. If I may, can I introduce you to two farmers?
Of course.
Which inspired this. Okay, so let me start at the beginning. The first farmer I want to introduce you all to is actually a farmer that was one of the early pioneers of Israel. Okay, I want you to think black and white pictures, pioneers draining the swamps. Why? Because they had no idea what they were doing. And for Israel to make the desert bloom is a crazy achievement. So before October the 7th, our NGO, we weren't working mostly in Israel, we were working mostly abroad. And so foreign governments would come and be like, but Danielle, how did Israel do this? It makes no sense. And the answers I heard were stupid. All the original pioneers succeeded because of the kibbutz or because of drip irrigation. You know drip irrigation? Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, that's a bit of a rubbish answer. So I thought, let's discover what did Israel actually do? So I thought, if I write about it, no one really will listen. But if Tony Blair writes about it, everyone will listen. So we created a partnership with Tony Blair. We wrote a case study. How did Israel create an agricultural miracle? One of the key lessons was what we call the golden triangle. This is the big secret to Israel's agricultural success. What they did is they put that early pioneer farmer in the middle of the triangle. Around the farmer, they put the scientists, people doing the research to come up with the challenge, the solutions, the agronomists, the people that go out to the field to train the farmers, and the private sector. And this is Israel's secret. So it was obvious to us after October 7th, we're going to create the golden triangle once again around Israel's farmers. And we know we're going to focus on designing the roadmap for the future. And then we got out to the field. And this is the second farmer. I'm standing in kibbutz Nachal Oz. I know a few of you have been out there with me. I don't know if anyone remembers Moran Freibach, our inspirational farmer. Moran is the father of 5 kids. He's the head of agriculture at kibbutz Nachal Oz. And we knew there was a lot of damage everywhere, okay? We knew that Hamas destroyed this bit here and that bit there. But I'm standing with Moran in the tractor yard, where some of you might have stood with me. And he said to me, Danielle, I have to show you something. Come over here. And he points down at the floor, and I can see a broken box. On the one side of the box, there's a smashed up computer board, and there's lots of mangled aerials. I have no idea what I'm looking at. He's like, Danielle, this is an irrigation control box. He said, we don't go around all of our massive fields and open the taps. We sit, we drink our coffee on the kibbutz, and we use our radio to control all the water. He said, I've just finished a tour of the whole kibbutz. We have 40 of these across all the fields, and every single one was destroyed by Hamas. And at that moment, we understood this was not a random attack on the agriculture. It wasn't a bit of arson on the way to targeting the communities. This was intentional, strategic, and planned. And that was the moment we realized we had to adapt our golden triangle, and we couldn't just focus on the future. You can't talk to the farmers at Kibbutz Nir Oz about what their plans are for 3 years' time, and they don't have any tractors because they were all stolen to Gaza. So Moran is that other farmer that in that moment the penny dropped in November, and we understood that the golden triangle will be used for the future, but once again for the big emergency.
Thank you so much for sharing that and helping us visualize it. Adi, I'd like to ask you the same question. We all know JDC is an incredible legacy organization, but you've also proven that you can innovate. So tell us a little bit about why you pivoted to employment and an example of someone who inspired that work.
Okay, so maybe I'll take you to October, to the week after October 7th, when my team and I, which were working on employment programs all the way before, and we were sitting in a meeting, first meeting after the 7th of October, I think it was the 8th of October in the morning, and looking to ourselves and thinking, employment is not going to look the same from now on. I don't think we realized how different it would look and how various and different and challenging the situation will be and will continue to be from then on. But we also knew another thing. We also learned another thing, and that is, as employment was so important to us as individuals going through the war ourselves, and I'm also from the South and from Be'er Sheva, and had lost many people, and was affected myself by the war, as all of us as Israelis, and feeling how important employment was to our resilience and our rehabilitation, we knew that was one of the most important missions of JDC. And so what we did is build on the infrastructure that we already had, the government partnerships, the NGOs that we worked with, the experience that we had with employment from before, and set out to find out what it is that people need. And I think Rena said, meet people where they are. That's what we did. We trained over the first 3 weeks, over 100 employment specialists that worked with us over the years before, trained them in 1 week and sent them out to the hotels and the communities to provide initial employment support and figure out what it is that people need. Becky was with me in one of those meetings in the first few months, and we learned that people have very different needs. You could find people in the hotels that said, we don't want to talk about employment. We're not ready to talk about employment. The parents of young children, or people who lost close family members, or family members who are still hostages. So that was one kind of need that we saw. Another need that we saw was people who want to get back to work ASAP, now. These are people from the kibbutzes. They work from the moment they're born until they die. They don't stop. So they wanted to get back to work, but the factories weren't working, and the situation didn't allow them to travel from the hotels to where they used to work. So for those people, we tried to offer practical support, transportation, babysitters, just helping them talk to their employer to figure out what it is they can do. And then other people who said, okay, this is a crisis. This is a time where I need to rethink my life and my career and my employment and try to look forward. I'll give an example of a story for that group of people. Think of a mother from Sderot. We have many, many parents from Sderot in our program, who is now back in Sderot, but of course, very, very busy with her children and the trauma that they've been through, and getting used to the new situation. She can't commute, and she can't afford any kind of reskilling or a new plan for her career. So we work with her to provide her an opportunity for both training and placement, which is either remote work or work close to where she lives. And those are the kinds of interventions that we began to do when we in the beginning of the war and until now.
Thank you, Adi. It sounds like you're responding to where people are in a variety of ways. Gilad, let's move over to the field of mental health for a moment. Obviously, October 7th introduced chaos into every system in the country, including health and mental health. Amid all of the turmoil, how did the Ministry of Health, and in your department in particular, work to identify needs?
So the needs were all over. We entered October 7th with a major mental health problem in the state of Israel because we could not provide the demand needed. We didn't have enough mental health professionals, and trying to provide the needs post-COVID was difficult enough. And then came October 7th. I remember myself in the horrible morning of that Shabbat, Simchat Torah, asking myself, how on earth are we going to deal with these demands? Because it was chaotic. We started by using what we have, which means we have hotlines for crisis, and we opened centers in the hospitals, and we started providing help for the helpers on that same Shabbat. We're talking about how are we going to support the doctors and the nurses in Soroka and Barzilai. And together with that, we started inventing things that we never thought we'll need to invent. For example, how do you support a family that doesn't know what happened to their beloved ones? So we organized a way to contact and to support the families. At the first point, we had many families that did not know what happened to their beloved ones. Then we had to invent groups to escort the families to identify the bodies in the Shura camp where the bodies came. We never trained people for such a thing, and we had to learn ongoing how to do it. So we had these 6 people every hour a day sitting there, and once they finished their shift, they sat with the 6 new people coming, and they told them what they learned on how to do it. Of course, we trained them with what we can, but each group trained the next group with what they learned and how to do it. For example, how to approach a body, to see the body before the family, and to tell the family from what direction to recognize. So we had to learn a lot of things, but the most difficult, chaotic need was the evacuees. Because if we have a struggling system of mental health services, and now suddenly we have about 300,000 people not in their homes, in areas where you do not have mental health clinics, and you need to think about how you're going to provide mental health services to these people, you need a Nes Chanukah for that. Mm-hmm. We really didn't know how we're going to do it. I actually remember 2 months after, when Chanukah really came, thinking about that was really a Chanukah miracle, because we did not provide a great care. It wasn't wonderful, but it was most you could achieve from what we had. And I think this is about innovation and hope. When you think about, I have not a lot, but I do not go into despair because of that, but I think about what I can achieve from what I have. And I think that was maybe the seed of the idea of eventually our cooperation with the JFNA and the federations to develop 16 trauma centers around communities all over Israel, because approaching the evacuees, we had to invent these staffs, these teams going and getting control of a district of a few hotels, and we didn't even know how many hotels are there, how many evacuees are there, and how you're going to provide that. And that was like the seed of the idea, which we could innovate with the help of the JFNA.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that will always stick with me, preparing people about how to talk about identifying bodies. I mean, that's just, it's a very Jewish thing that we did that in a sensitive way. So thank you for that. Adi, you talked about how you began to identify needs in the population by talking to people and sending out people. How did you eventually develop into a program out of that needs identification?
So first, I want to say thank you, which I didn't say in the beginning, because it's very important to me to say how grateful we are for the partnership that is here in the room, beginning with JFNA, who spearheaded the support in this program, but many federations sitting here in the room that have supported, and it's a long list, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but really thank you. And the way that we went about it is we continued to do learning by doing. So after going out to the hotels, we went out to the hospitals to meet with the people who were injured and traumatized by the war. And we went out to the communities, either the ones who went back to their homes in the Gaza Strip or the ones who went to the kibbutzes where they're living for the time being for the next 2 years. And we talked to the people and we try to understand what it is, how employment can be incorporated into the rehabilitation process. And so from then, we developed 3 major pillars of our program. One is the trauma-aware employment training, which is also, it's a model that's also based on research from the US saying that if you incorporate employment intervention in the first 6 months and you get people back to any kind of routine, any kind of employment routine, training, school, over the first 6 months, the chances of this person going back to work after they've completed the rehabilitation process is much higher. If you wait a year of unemployment, even if the person is working very hard on other aspects of their lives, then it's almost less than 1% that they'll ever go back to the workforce. So this early intervention is something that we've been working on, and we already have over 250 participants. One of them is here with me in this conference. You can meet him. And we meet them. We begin the intervention in the hospital. We work with the social workers and the doctors to sell to the clients the idea of incorporating employment guidance in the beginning from the first month. And it's not trivial, most of them say, why would I be talking about employment right now? I can't even imagine myself standing up. But if you start speaking about it and you start working on it, then your chances are higher to get back. So that's one pillar. The second pillar is working with the communities, with the kibbutzim. As I said, these are communities that are used to working. So there's a lot of shame in not working. And there's a lot of shame in not being able to get back to work or in having trouble holding on to their jobs. So what we're doing there is working with the resources of the communities in groups, the young groups, the elderly, the resource development, the HR of each kibbutz is telling us what the needs are, and we're providing the support and the resources so they can create their own employment processes for those people. And lastly, we went to the business sector in the areas that were hit, so the north and the south. And we asked the businesses what it is they need to continue employment, to retain their employees, and to work with the employee shortage, which is huge in Israel because of the reserve, because of the people that were hit. And we created a bridge between the needs of the job seekers through vocational training, short-term training, to the needs of the businesses. And so this part of the program does training and placement, and it's long-term, and its idea is not only to work with the individual and serve the individual, of course that's the most important, but also to develop mechanisms for regional economic recovery in the north and the south.
Well, of course, it's going to serve the individual if the economy has jobs to provide. Yes. So you have to have that connect. You described a lot of different aspects of collaboration, but can you describe, is there any more sort of field collaboration with other NGOs? You're coordinating with the business sector, with the kibbutzim, but maybe just say another word about collaboration in the field of in workforce development.
So just to say, all of this work would not have been possible if we didn't have these collaborations. For example, our work with trauma awareness, we work with Natal, which is an organization that specializes in trauma. And we developed the employment model together. And so all of our staff is being trained both by my staff, which is employment specialists, and Natal's staff. Every single month they have trainings. It's ongoing. So that's one example. Another example is there are many employment organizations in Israel and infrastructures and organizations like That's Me that are supported, and Reimagined, which is in the Arab sector. And so we work with them, we train them, and we provide them with the resources. And so when we go out to the field, we go together, we don't compete. And that's also important. And also we couldn't have done it without them.
Wonderful, wonderful. So Danielle, addressing the immense agricultural rehabilitation that you described is a big task. Tell us about the biggest challenges you're facing and trying to innovate to meet the new needs, particularly of the South.
Okay, so I think there were two key challenges. The first one is that no one knew what the hell to do. Seriously, this was completely unprecedented. It was a disaster on a massive scale. On the first or second week after October 7th, I got a call from the Israeli government saying, could you advise us, like you just advised the government in the Bahamas, on what we should do? I was like, I don't think so. No. So this is a massive challenge, okay? This has not happened in Israel before. It hasn't happened around the world before. But what's special about Israel is that we have all of the expertise and the technologies to save ourselves. And so we did create that golden triangle around our farmers. And I don't want to say we're making things up as we go along, but we take the scientists, the agronomists, and the private sector together with the farmers in the field, a little bit like what we just heard. And we ask them, what are your challenges? What do you need? And accordingly, we try and come up with a plan. I think the fact that no one knew what to do was worsened by the fact that there's no real national food security plan for the state of Israel either. If there had been a 30-year plan roadmap, maybe then we could identify and align some of our programs
Or any
accordingly.
other plan.
Okay, any other plan. I don't want to get political here. So I can give you a concrete example of what we're doing right now. We have a fantastic plan for the South. We've got a farming first aid portfolio, and we'll talk about JFNA. And we have a Grow Back Stronger 3 to 5 year plan for the South. What would you do in the North? I said to my team 2 months ago, someone go and get the data. Let's have a look. What the hell is happening in the North? All I hear is rumors that the North is worse than the South. I said, someone go and paint me a data picture. What's going on? Do you think there was data? No. So we've just done the first needs assessment of agricultural needs in the North. We have a white paper in draft. I can tell you, even if you said to me, Danielle, tomorrow you have $50 million, I don't know what we should do with it yet. It's not that easy, so there's no roadmap. I want to say the second key challenge that we faced early on is that the world of global Jewish philanthropy was not used to engaging with Israeli agriculture anymore. Right? I want you to think back. The last few decades, Israeli agriculture was strong. The kibbutzim, the communities, they were amazing businesses, were exporting to Europe. It was only probably my grandparents' generation. I remember growing up as a small kid, my grandparents' house, they used to have a blue box on the British fireplace. And that's where they would put their tzedakah on a Friday night, and it was to go to build the land of Israel. That's what old Zionist Jewish philanthropy was about. And in the first few weeks after October 7th, when I started conversations, generally speaking, Jewish philanthropy said, well, we don't do agriculture. We do community resilience. We do economic resilience. And so I think somehow we've come full circle and a re-embrace of what it means to build the land of Israel. And we've had to do it again. So they were the two big challenges that we're working to overcome.
That's fascinating because I grew up with a grandmother very active in raising money for JNF. So I think it's important that you painted that picture of what we got started with, we now have to come back to. And,
back at the beginning.
Yeah, at the beginning. So Gilad, you mentioned that you partnered with Jewish Federations of North America as part of making these mental health centers a reality. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that support it has helped you all think nimbly and respond, and just kind of how the development of these mental health centers came together?
So as I said before, the idea grew from the fact that we had to establish teams to provide the need to the districts of the hotels. Then we actually thought we have the structure of the Israeli mental health system is based on the HMOs, the health funds, they're supposed, like all the medical system, are supposed to provide the basic needs. We have the hospitals and their clinics, and we have the resilience centers that grew up and we enlarged throughout since October 7th. So we understood that we have the resilience centers providing the first need, the prevention, and we need the next stage, because we need centers that can teach communities all over the country and can provide the need for mental health, specifically in trauma terms, for the people that need more than what the resilience centers provide. And we decided that this next step is essential. Once we decided that, we started thinking, how can we make this real? And this is another big challenge that we were confronting, because as I said, the Israeli medical system is used to work with these 4 health funds that we have. And every citizen in Israel is part of one of them, and he has his resilience because he knows he'll get all what he needs through these 4. But when we're talking after October 7th about who's providing mental health, that can be confusing, because suddenly you have national security providing to people that got hurt from the terror attack, and you have suddenly the Ministry of Defense providing, and you have a lot of NGOs coming into the market and enlarging. And as I said before, our biggest problem is manpower. We have not a lot of professional manpower. We have only 300 child and youth psychiatrists in Israel that work in the system. We have only 1,000 adult psychiatrists in Israel. We always thought that we have enough psychologists in Israel and social workers, but after October 7th, we understand that that's not enough either. So if we have all these ministries and all these NGOs and philanthropy together, starting to pull this manpower, professional manpower, to all directions, this is continuing the chaos. So we understood that we must try. We cannot control it all, of course, and we do not think we should control it all, but we need to direct it. And the ability to make these collaborations with NGOs, with philanthropy, with the federations, and to be able to say, this is what we need. These are the directions that should be held, because this is the way to recover and to build up resilience again. In mental health terms, this is the right way. And I really appreciate the cooperation that we had here, because it could be a disaster, because money does not buy everything, and sometimes money buys things in the wrong way, even if it seems right. Because we really have doctors leaving hospitals and departments closing. I had to talk about it with one of the hospital last week, and I told them, you're not closing a department, not on these times. You cannot do such a thing. But you need to understand, taking one doctor from a hospital can close a department. So we need to struggle and think how we can do things together to move this big ship to the right direction. And I think that these collaborations are the hope that can hold the system for the future.
And thank you for that explanation. And are the 16 centers up and running? Are they staffed, given what you've talked about professionals? Just give us a quick glimpse on what's the status.
We have them in different stages. We have some that opened already and providing care for the Nova survivors and providing care for people from the South needing help and for evacuees. But we have in different places, they're in different stages. We have, I think all of them are on the path of building. They all have steps. They all have plans for where they're going to be. We insist that it's going to be inside the community and not inside the hospitals, because we want the hospitals moving out and not thinking about providing intensive care inside walls, but inside communities. So we insist on that. But really we see it building. We have a few working already, and we're heading towards by the end of 2025, all of them working and providing all the needs.
Great. And I'm sure you're going to learn a lot along the way. Danielle, you mentioned the challenge in the beginning and getting philanthropy to understand the need for agriculture. Talk to us a little bit about how the collaboration and the funding from JFNA has made a difference and hopefully attracted other philanthropy.
Yeah, so this is my moment to say thank you, a huge, huge thank you. I can tell you when Becky called me on that Friday morning, right before Shabbat, I did just burst into tears.
Oh, you were down with the flu.
I was also had a fever and a bit delirious, but I really did burst into tears because you have to understand that in the second week after October 7th, I got a call from some of the communities, the kibbutzim, and they told me, Danielle, if we don't rebuild the agriculture, there is no foundation to rebuild the communities. And I was struggling to share the story. And when I got that call from Becky, I was delirious with fever, but I did burst into tears because it just meant to the farmers that, number one, they weren't alone. And number two, that they could literally get back on their feet. Like I went to Near Oz. I know the federations who visit us in Near Oz. Hamas stole every single tractor Near Oz had to Gaza. They had nothing to work with. So I said, what are you going to do? And they said, we don't know. And like you heard, they can't not go back to do it. So we really appreciate the collaboration with JFNA. It's actually been a game changer for the farmers, both in the project itself, but also in terms of leadership. You know, the JFNA has led the way for global Jewish philanthropy to once again embrace Israel's agriculture, Israel's farmers, and I believe we're on a new path. I thought in the first few days when we set up Regrow, I told the team, we're just going to pause our other work and we're just going to do Regrow for 3 months. It then became a year. It then became 3 to 5 years because that's the only respectable professional response to an emergency as you transition. And now the conversation I'm hearing is, well, it should be a lifetime organization for Israel, you know, the way the Jewish Agency does that and agriculture does that. And so actually it's been an incredible privilege to be on that journey and to work together with the JFNA. So thank you, really all.
Well, thank you so much to all three of you. I know we're learning a lot from talking to you, and we're very grateful for your work. I'd now like to let people ask questions from the audience. So there is a microphone here, and there's one way over there. So if you want to make your way to a mic and address a question to any of our panelists, we'd love to hear what's on your mind. And if you wouldn't mind, introduce your name and your community, just so we all continue to know who everyone is. Don't be shy.
Thank you, everyone. My name's Jack. I'm based in Vancouver in Canada. I work in kind of the environment field. I'm very interested in the work that you're doing. I think there's a sentiment with a lot of Jews who feel guilty for not helping potentially as much as possible and feeling like, how can we help if we're not in Israel? And to you, is there kind of anything, volunteer work, or kind of like remote research, or, and this can be a conversation for after, but I just kind of ask the question on kind of what can people do if they're, and this can be for everyone as well, like not on the ground in Israel.
Great.
So for me personally, in the agricultural space, if you want to volunteer in person, I can definitely recommend some incredible agricultural-based organizations that do it much better than we do. And we're all for collaboration, you know, Leket and Shomer Hadash, they're fantastic for volunteers in Israel. With us volunteering around the world, I think there is a huge need. There's a great need perhaps for research in different ways. We're trying to be innovative and thinking about new financial models, about integrating new technologies to close the gap that you always see, which doesn't just exist in Israel, but around the world, between what the farmers do in the field and the technologies that exist. How do you close that gap, a knowledge gap, a financing gap? So we can have that conversation afterwards, but yes, there's a lot to do. And the last thing I'll say takes me back to our work before October 7th, which I would term agricultural advocacy. I think Israel's agricultural expertise and experience and its innovation is probably the most vastly underutilized tool the state of Israel has today to promote itself, diplomatically, economically, in terms of tikkun olam. And actually, we're being approached now by global leaders saying, well, what have you learned since October 7th? Can you share that again? And so I would be very happy to think also in terms of volunteers about how we can build an agricultural advocacy package for Israel, which doesn't touch on politics, but takes the best lessons of climate resilient, sustainable agriculture once again around the world.
Great. Did either of you also want to respond on resources or volunteering? Go ahead.
I'll be happy. We have a big issue with volunteers because a lot of people want to volunteer in mental health issues. The problem in mental health is that you need not permanent, but a long support. And you need licensing, because when we work in the medical system, you need licensing that is approved in Israel. Together with that, we understand today, and this is one of the new thoughts we have after October 7th, that mental health does not sit only in the Ministry of Health. Mental health sits in communities. Mental health sits in youth movements, in schools, in how I help my neighbor. And this is a place where I think volunteering can enter, because we're trying to build now in municipalities and in city councils resilience thought, resilience training, to see how these things could be established. And these are things that are growing now. We do that together with JDC, and that's a good collaboration with the help of the federations again. And we're thinking about how we can strengthen that. So I think that volunteers could take place in things that are not in medical terms, but are essential for communities to build their resilience with mental health experts that could volunteer, and also with people that might not be mental health experts to volunteer inside communities, and see how we can do that.
Great. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I can. When someone offers me resources, I always say yes. So I'll give two examples of how we can be supported by volunteer work from across the ocean or the oceans. One is definitely research. I can say that what I did in the first 3 months of the war at night was try to research anything that happened in the world that can give me any kind of inspiration of what kind of interventions we can create with trauma and employment, with communities and employment, anything that can be, how do you combine employment and recovery? And I think there's still a lot out there that we can learn, and that could always be helpful. So I'm willing to talk later if I'd love to talk later. And another thing that this is, I think, maybe to everyone, one of the things that we've been trying to do is recruit large companies that work in Israel that offer jobs, and get them to offer remote positions for people from the south and from the north, because we want these people to have good, steady jobs, and we don't want them to leave the north and the south. That's very, very crucial. So we've managed to get some very big Israeli companies on board, but any connections that you might have in the business sector in Israel could be of help.
Amazing. Do we have another question? Yes.
So, hi everyone. My name is Liana Silverberg, and thank you so much for this wonderful panel. I'm originally from New Jersey and now live in New York. But my question is kind of around the synergy between all three of what you guys do. I think it seems like there's a lot of collaboration that has been done and could be done between the three of your kind of sectors and organizations. And I would just love to learn more about how you all three work together and kind of integrate the three kind of different sectors of mental health and farming and jobs.
Great. Who wants to take that one first?
I can talk from a JDC perspective,
Sure.
Because we do have, we collaborate, of course, with the Ministry of Health, and also we have some work in agriculture, specifically in the unit that I'm part of. I think that we look at recovery as something, recovery rehabilitation as something holistic. So the way that we work, specifically in my programs, is that we try to integrate the employment support into processes of mental health, and working with farmers and supporting farmers in understanding what their needs are in terms of employment and trying to cater to that. That's how we work at JDC. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. Anyway.
Okay, so it's an excellent question. It's something I've been thinking about more now that we're a year on, because we were so absorbed in this emergency response. On the mental health side, I can say that it's not something that we do. We're agricultural experts, have all the scientists in Israel and agronomists on board. But it's something that the farmers, if you can imagine your typical macho kibbutz farmer, never admitting they have a mental health crisis, okay? And so the head of the field crops at Kibbutz Alumim, when I was last with him, he said to me, Danielle, I did an ambush. I'm like, I don't know what that means. He said, he's like, I told all the farmers to come to my office. We got a meeting on the crops at 3:00. And they walked in and there was a therapist there. And he said, everyone opened up in a way that no one even knew, you know, that this guy was about to die and he was there with his son. They ran out of bullets and Hamas suddenly at the last moment left, you know. And they said to me, can you help us now? He said, you know, all of these other groups are getting mental health support as a group, but what about all of the heads of field crops? Can't you do a retreat for us? And I was like, oh, you know them. So yes, I have that task on me. And in terms of employment, like I said, we were just absorbed with farming first aid, and now we're shifting into resilience, which goes to employment, and we've started holding initial conversations with JDC and Tevet about how do we integrate those and sort of rolling out new programs. So it was an excellent question.
I'll refer to, and I'll say, at the beginning of the war, I must say that for me, collaborations was sort of a headache, because what doesn't work before, to try to establish it when you're in a chaos, it is so complicated. All these round tables that were made, I was really sick of them. But after that, I will say that the ability to put aside ego and to think how you can collaborate is really essential, because we first had to figure out how we collaborate inside the Ministry of Health, because we have the strategic part working on things that sometimes my mental health services section does not even know about. And we have community medicine that doesn't know of what we're doing. So we had just to make these collaborations. And then we had to go to other offices and to see how we're going to do that. And it's really working when you put aside ego and you're starting to think about what I have and how I can help wherever it's needed and how other people can take part. It starts to work. And as I said, mental health does not sit in the Ministry of Health. It sits in the Agriculture Office, and it sits in any place, because people that are employed and people that have a future and people that know that they have education for their children, that's all about resilience. This is what we need for a good mental health.
Do we have another question? Yes.
Hi, thank you. Shalom. Shmuel Bowman from Life Shield. We're a non-profit NGO that places bomb shelters in Israel for the past 18 years. So thank you for your words today. My question is focused to Adi. So we've noticed in the construction side that prior to October the 7th, the construction in terms of laborers were coming from primarily a Palestinian sector. And obviously since then, there's been a real lack of construction workers. Is there a thought regarding retraining of Israelis to get into the construction industry? Thanks.
Great question. Actually, I feel that I should have addressed it myself. So that was the first thing that when we looked at the data, you know, at the beginning of the war, we looked at the data and we said, okay, what are we going to do about this? And I will say something very surprising, and this has to do with collaboration. So we've had an initial collaboration before, but now it's growing very strong with a fund that is in charge of training people in the construction industry. It's like a union of the construction companies, and they train their workers, and they also trained for many years Palestinians. And they partnered with many bodies, including with us. And we actually funded, and we're still funding right now, a very large number of training courses for people to go into the construction field. the thing is that in the first meeting, I said to them, okay, everything sounds great, but who's going to come? Who is going to come? And we were so surprised. They were able to train so far over 2,000 people, not all in collaboration with us, but overall over 2,000 people. And she has, she's able, she's the CEO of this fund. She says she has people coming in for any course we open, she can fill it up. So we have people from the Arab sector, many, but also from, Jews, Israelis who say, okay, this is a time to work in construction and build our country. So, yes.
Great question. In response, yes, back here.
First of all, my name is Tomer, originally from Kibbutz Nahal Oz, and my brother Moran says hi.
לא נכון.
כן.
יואו, אני
Just
רוצה
now.
לתת לך חיבוק.
Love to meet later. And I'm the CEO of an organization called Bishvil HaMachar. We are supporting reservists in coping with mental health, with combat-related trauma. Now, I know this session is about the emergency response, and I want to thank the JFNA for supporting us, also with other federations. You led the way, and thank you for that. But what are your thoughts about the long-term needs? Because the things that we deal with will take decades to deal with just from this war. What is it? Because we got support, and wherever we got support from the JFNA and other places, it was always the emergency campaigns. What are your thoughts about that?
It's a great question. It was one of the wrap-up questions, so you can answer it now. When you think about the long-term needs for both innovation and ongoing support, how are you thinking about it? You can each address it. It doesn't matter, whatever order you want to go.
Okay, I'll begin. I'll be happy to begin. We built, actually, in the first week of the war, the CEO of the Ministry of Health called me and told me, Gilad, I know you're dealing with opening this and opening that. You need to start to think about a long-term plan. And I couldn't think about a long-term plan, but I said, okay, I'll take a few people and tell them to start working on it. And actually, 2 months into the war, we came out with a national program to rebuild mental health services in Israel. It's a huge plan. We got from the government about $400 million for that. And it's really thinking about how we're not just closing gaps, but how we're rebuilding the system, because the system is very poor. People get low salaries. The cost to open a service is high, but what they get for it is low. So it's not economic to open anything in mental health today, and we're starting to change that. So we have changes in salaries. We have changes in pricing inside the system. We have training for new residents in psychiatry and psychology, and we're trying to think long-term how we're going to make changes that will last. We're talking about implementing the mental health hospitals inside the big hospitals that we have in Israel so they will not be segregated. We really have a lot of thoughts about how we can reconstruct the system, including improving our triage, including improving measurements, of course, all working by evidence-based interventions. And we're really trying to reconstruct the system. It's a huge task, but this is the time to think about it, how we can leverage the situation and to see the most we can, that in a few years, in 10 years, we'll see a much better mental health system in Israel. But it's a challenge.
Well, and when someone hears you received $400 million from the government, they may say, well, so what's the role of philanthropy if there's $400 million of government? And so maybe all of you address this in this question, but why do you still need philanthropy with that kind of government funding? I know you do, but help our audience understand that.
I'll explain. When I get a budget of $400 million from the government, every cent in it has a purpose that I was committing to. So I cannot put all my dreams in it, and $400 million is not enough. And I can say we put a few tens of millions for rebuilding hospitals, and a few tens of millions for training, and we have a special. We have a lot of programs and a lot of fields, but it's not enough. And not only it's not enough, it's not always directed to the right places. So now if I have a new plan that I want to start, then they tell me, but you got $400 million. So what do you want now? And we do not always have what we need on a specific time to innovate and to begin with. And it's essential that we have these right collaborations with the federations so we can direct and say, this is what we need now. These are the directions that are right to go. And not necessarily things that we do. It can be things that NGOs do. And I say, these are the right directions. And I appreciate supporting them because this is how the system can build itself as a strong system. And this is what can give us time, space to look up to the future and to rebuild hope. That's the way to do it.
Great. Do either of you want to talk about long-term plans and why philanthropy is needed?
I'll start with the philanthropy piece, if possible. So I'll
Sure.
build on what you said. The government doesn't have all the money that's needed. In addition, they'll come in with specific requirements. So let me give you two concrete examples in agriculture. The first is classic with the JFNA. So near Oz, they stole all of the tractors. Nahal Oz has huge agricultural damage. There's no insurance because it's an act of war, so it's void. So what does the government do? It has a mechanism called mas rechush. They will come and they'll say to you, or they said to Moran, that's a lovely tractor, Moran, but it was 5 years old. So we'll give you $50,000. But Moran has to buy a new tractor for $270,000. And that is why they were not moving. So philanthropy has helped us close that gap. I can tell you another example. Kumar right now has a fantastic program to help farmers get back on their feet, introduce innovation. But what? They said, Danielle, we need partnership with you. We need the philanthropic piece. But I said, but why? You have a huge budget. He said, well, we're only allowed to give up to 50%, but it's really 30% because of the tax. And the farmer has to pay it all up front. And I said, well, they can't do that. And so we need the philanthropy to come in to, number one, to close the gap. The other thing the government is not good at is moving quickly.
Not here either. That's a universal problem.
Any government is not good at moving quickly. Yeah. And so Tkuma, who we're sharing all our plans with, and they look very similar now, they've got a plan of doing model farms in all the different value chains. So we've already launched our project in the model farms for the dairy, for the greenhouses, etc. And Tkuma are not there yet. They said, this is fantastic. You've started with the philanthropy, and at some point next year, or 2026, we're going to come in and complement it. I said, fine. So I think that's part of it. The other thing is the government, and it should be good at it, is not that good at taking risks. Mm-hmm. And philanthropy is very good at risk taking.
Absolutely.
So we are designing a new, innovative, farmer-centered philanthropic revolving fund. We want to launch it at some point next year. But my dream is that it's not funded forever by philanthropy. It should be a pilot, which would then be adopted nationally by the government. So I think philanthropy has a role at doing some of the riskiest stuff, testing it out, proving, and then it be adopted by the government.
Say a little bit more. What would this revolving fund do? It sounds like an interesting concept. Is it
so it's about the medium?
Farmers,
it's about the medium term. It should be a loan,
Uh-huh.
but with a great risk component. That if the farmer doesn't succeed, then they don't necessarily have to pay it back.
Got it.
Because what is
Converts
preventing the
into a grant.
farmers today to taking a technology that already exists on the shelf? Number one, the know-how. So they need the experts there to say, take this technology and not that one. Because if you ask the company, they'll all try and convince you that their irrigation is the right one or their drone. But also they need that risk capital. You know, farming is not a profitable business. These are not people making lots of money in high tech, okay? We're doing it, yes, because it provides the income for the communities, but it's also about Zionism. It's about national food security. It's about having our communities on the borders. And that's why I think there's a huge role there for philanthropy to help move that. So that's the idea of the fund, this gap between where the farmers are today and where they should be in 5-10 years' time. They need that philanthropic role, which takes me to the medium long-term question. For us, it's very clear. We have plans for both now. Well, the medium, definitely, the long we're working on. The medium term, our farmers have to be more productive, more profitable, more sustainable, and more climate resilient. And we believe the way to do this is to integrate new technological innovations. You have to do that together with the experts and the farmers and with the right financial mechanism. It should not be solely philanthropy. Agriculture is a business. It needs philanthropy, but it can't be alone. And so we're working on every project for a blended model. Philanthropy, perhaps low-cost loans or impact investment, and then a layer for the government. In the long term, I think we have to build a national food security plan. When I say we, I'm talking about the royal we. I mean, yes, it would be nice for the government to really move the needle on that. I'm not sure we can afford to wait. I think there is huge amounts of capital out there, both philanthropy, both serious investment money, and what about green bonds? You know how we made the desert bloom? Apart from the Golden Triangle, which you know now. We did it because our incredible first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, had this crazy vision. He said, I want to make the desert bloom. Someone bring the water from the Sea of Galilee 250 kilometers down into the desert, and then we'll do agriculture in the desert. And he made it happen because he put a huge budget behind it. Now, what's it going to take to make Israel food secure? Do we have to start growing wheat in the Negev or the Arava? What kind of massive investments in terms of hundreds of millions of dollars do we need to do things like that? Is anyone thinking on the scale of Ben-Gurion with the vision about new infrastructure, agrivoltaics, the integration of solar energy and agriculture? Green bonds are huge markets. They don't have enough products for them. There's a lot of options there. And I know there's a lot of countries, America included, that see a very close relationship, as we should, between national food security and national security. And so I think there is a lot of funding out there. It has to be built between philanthropy, investment funding, and government. And there's a very clear medium and long-term picture.
Fascinating. Adi?
It is fascinating.
No, I know.
I will just say that what I have learned, and I think is probably clear, is that employment is resilience, employment is recovery and relief, and employment is growth. And it's personal growth and it's economic growth. And so we don't have the luxury of staying at emergency responses. Every single service that we are now developing and providing has to be something that looks to the future, to the next 3, 5, and 10, maybe even 20 years, and creating mechanisms that are able to help people get back to work, but also get people in better jobs and better skilled for better jobs. And that is our vision. In what all of the work that we're doing, we're trying to create regional mechanisms that close the skill gap between the potential employees in the Israel periphery, in the south and the north, and the needs of the employers. And I think if we manage to do that, we create stronger, more resilient, economically resilient communities in the north and in the south. And that is not only an economic need, as you said, it's a security need, and it's and it's also a national kind of even spiritual and I don't know, in terms of our spirit, right?
For sure.
Right, our hope.
Great. We've got a question over here. Or two questions on this side of the room.
Hi, my name is Aran Zimrin from the Israeli Association for Child Protection. Mental health issues. I would like to ask about Shirel Golan, who committed suicide a couple of weeks ago, and there are other cases that might happen. First of all, I have to say that in Eli, we drove to the hotels Monday morning on the October 9th with dozens of professional therapists. We met 2,000 victims, and till today we are working with almost 200 severe victims from the October 7th attack. We are doing a lot of work with them, and we knew Shirel Golan, and I asked in our team, I asked why didn't we take care of her? And she was actually not a priority because she was not sexually abused and no one else in her family was hurt. And we did take care of almost 200 victims in the same situation, but we didn't have enough money. We raised only almost $1 million, and we did help a lot of victims. But there are more cases like Shirel Golan, who used up 36 sessions in Israel. She was not entitled to receive any other sessions, and she was hospitalized. And
Okay,
in
I'm
hospital,
going to ask
yes.
you to just leave it there because we have 3 minutes. So let him respond. We've
Okay,
certainly,
please.
it's a grave situation. We all share the pain of a loss like that, and we all want to see it prevented.
Because there
why
are
don't
many
you
cases
respond?
like this here and now.
Okay, I hear you, and we're very sensitive to it, but I think we got the scope of the question. Gilad, how would you respond to that?
First, my grief is with the family of Shirel Golan that committed suicide, and she was a Nova survivor. I'll say, thanks God, we do not know about more cases of Nova survivors that committed suicide, and actually we follow numbers of suicidality inside Israel, and like we know in research, on trauma times, on war times, we have less suicidality in Israel. It does not say that we do not have people that suffer and people that we should be worried about, and we worry about the future because we are concerned that people that will not get therapy, eventually we might see a real rise, again, like we see in research in the future. I'll say that every citizen in Israel is able to get mental health treatment at the first stage from the resilience centers, and this is the 36 meetings that you were talking about, and every citizen in Israel after that can get therapy either from their HMOs or from the centers that we're opening with the hospitals. I will say that not always the lack of treatment is the reason for suicidality, and I can mention quite a few cases that I know that the problem is handling correctly the therapies that are given, because we have people today that get therapy both or triplet from the resilience centers, from hospitals, from the HMOs, from NGOs, and so on. And we need to figure out how we're controlling all the different kinds of therapies given inside the system in order for people to get what they really need to support them and to prevent eventually what we both fear about.
Thank you very much. I want to thank our panelists, Dr. Gilad Bodenheimer, Adi Blutner, and Danielle Abraham, as well as Rena Goldberg. I want to let you know that tomorrow morning there will be a special breakfast that happens to be happening in this room to hear directly from Israelis about their ongoing needs. It will be at 7 a.m. So if obviously you're hearing from Israelis now, that sounds funny to say directly from Israelis, but from other Israelis. So I hope you all feel inspired by these amazing, amazing people who are themselves living through this experience and yet providing so much for our Jewish people. So I hope you join me in thanking them.
Thank you.